everyone to today's nicotine and vaping cessation webinar. We're very lucky to have clinical Professor Renee here joining us. But firstly, before we dive into things, I'd love to do a welcome to country. So I'd like to acknowledge the Wangal people as the traditional custodians of this land as we gather here, myself at Cinelippic Park, and acknowledge that this is and always was and always will be Aboriginal land. So Renee has sent me through what she describes as a brief bio, but I don't think your academic and clinical achievements can be summarized to be too short. But yeah, so you're a clinical academic who's been pioneering, specialising in nicotine addiction for more than 40 years, and you're considered a world expert in this field. So you're the first and only full Professor of Nicotine Addiction in Australia. You initiated the first ever smokers clinic in Australia, and now most recently the first ever vaping cessation clinic in Australia. Founder and editor-in-chief of the international peer-reviewed Journal of Smoking Cessation, published by Cambridge University, was part of the very first quit campaigns in the 1980s. Introduced NRT to Australia, visiting professor at Charles University in Prague, amongst others, on multiple national and international committees on nicotine use and abuse. Conjoint professor at Notre Dame University, Australia, professor and head of nicotine addiction unit at Avalon University, and most recently appointed to the Woolcock Institute of Medical Research as a clinician in nicotine addiction and an honorary fellow of the Lifestyle Medicine Association of Australasia. So Renee, I think it's safe to say you know a thing or two about nicotine, and we're in very safe hands. And I'd love to pass over to you to gain some of your wisdom today.
Thank you so much, Chloe, for introducing me. And I know it's, I try to be as concise as I can, and certainly today I've got, how do I say it, a very long story with a very small amount of time to cover a lot of material. So I'll really cut straight to the chase and say I'm going to present a substantial amount of evidence-based information, and I've put it in a way that I hope those who are listening and watching can look back at it, glean information, take notes if they want to now, but just be aware that some of the material I've got is all evidence-based, and that's an important thing for me to actually say. So as you said, this is a little bit about me, but what I did want to say, and that's what I look like, a little bit about me is that I have no conflicts of interest. Now, that's not a small thing to say. In our field, there are people who talk up nicotine, talk up vaping, talk up smoking, or tobacco use or harm reduction. Just be aware, I have no conflicts of interest. I evidently don't work for the tobacco industries. They wouldn't give me their money anyway. But apart from them, I don't work for any subsidiaries of that, and some of the vaping companies are subsidiaries of that. And I certainly also do not work for any of the pharmaceutical companies that make products that I'm going to recommend people use, like NRT. I don't work for those companies. I don't take any of their hospitality or anything at all. So I'm fairly squeaky clean. So I just wanted to say that before we start, so people think, oh, maybe she's got some conflicts. I don't. And it's always worth asking other people you hear from. It's not a small matter today. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the mechanisms of nicotine delivery and why that matters to everybody who's using nicotine, what they should know about it, the myths and misconceptions about nicotine, whether it's benign or safe or safer, what are the medical consequences of some of the things that people are using, be it, smoking or vaping, what's the implications of using nicotine with other comorbid substance abuse, some of the myths about harm reduction strategies, which I'm going to certainly cover. And remember, all the tips and evidence that I'm giving is, evidence-based, and that's important. And you'll have the citations available to you. Everything is citable and citations available to you. Quickly about smoking prevalence, need I say, in my time, and that's not a small thing, in my time, the smoking prevalence has gone down hugely. This is just to show you that little daily smoking line's gone right down. Non-smokers has gone right up, and hopefully a lot more ex-smokers. And that's just to remind you about what our situation is here in Australia. We are absolutely world-class at driving prevalence of smoking down for a whole gamut of reasons, which I don't have time to talk about today, but one of them is socially unacceptable to smoke inside, let alone outside now, and a whole lot of public health initiatives and a whole lot of aids and help for people to quit. This is a little bit about the prevalence of smoking. Vaping in Australia today is a bit of a tricky story because it depends a lot on who's doing it and the numbers. It literally changes from day to day. But this is just to show you, of course, there's been a rise of it. This has come, how do I put it, under the radar. Basically, during COVID, it really went up, and it's gone up and up and up. As a lot of you might know, this is material from the Australian Institute of Health and Welfare. And it's just to show you and remind you that there are lots of people who are doing this. Doesn't mean everybody's addicted, I'll just add that. But a lot of people are doing it. A lot of young people are doing it. It's obvious in the community, lots of adolescents, lots of young people doing it. And how young is young? I'm just telling you now, I'm seeing a young person who's 9, whose parents brought this young person to see me because they've become addicted to it, having acquired it through their older sibling. That's how they got hold of it. Now, can this happen? Absolutely. And do they have symptoms of withdrawal? Yes, they do. So just don't underestimate young people, and I'll come back to that later. So who's still using nicotine products in Australia today? This is, again, evidence-based. We know is the fact that those who could have quit have quit. Lots of people have stopped, as we said. Lots of people haven't even started. So there's a whole community of young people who've never, ever had a cigarette, maybe have started vaping, never having smoked. So there's a community of that. So nicotine users now today, we think are the harder target. Just put kids aside for a minute, but look at adults, and I'm talking young, from 18 and onwards. They're quite nicotine dependent, highly dependent. They might have comorbid mental health concerns, comorbid drug and alcohol concerns, diseases related to their smoking or vaping, and still do it. Remember, that's a criteria for dependence, that you do it in the face of what you know to be contrary to your best interests. You're doing it anyway. I want to remind you of that. That's one of the definitions. Don't think, oh my God, that person's got asthma and they shouldn't be smoking or vaping. By definition, if they are, that defines them as being dependent, because they're doing it in the face of the medical consequences. So the heart, the lungs, the respiratory, whatever you think, why are you doing this? Think dependent. That's why you're doing this. So that's the diseases related to their smoking or vaping now today. Multiple attempts to try to stop. So it's not like people are not motivated. They are absolutely motivated to do something about this. Most people want to stop. Most people want to have control, right? They've lost their autonomy over this. Is again part of the definition. I don't have a lot of control, and you need to ask people, do you have control over this? Can you control it? Most can't, who are dependent on it. They often have multiple life stressors, like things happen in their lives, and I'll come back to the stressful life and other things that imply that their lives are more stressful than other people. There are higher rates of smoking and vaping both in our Aboriginal populations and in our Indigenous Aboriginal populations who are pregnant women in particular. So they've become, this is a group in general that's become targeted. Some of you might see money flowing to help this particular group where there are much more higher rates. Is it a lower socioeconomic group? Not necessarily at all, as we've seen, especially with vaping. Vaping crosses all socioeconomic groups. All you have to do is go to the North Shore of Sydney, where there's a lot of private schools, and these kids have got money and they're buying it. So it's not necessarily deprived kids. It's not necessarily kids with, as I said, with no money. They use mum and dad's credit card or whatever they're doing. So they're moneyed. They've got their social status is pretty good, but they're pretty dependent, and that's what we're seeing too. So don't go exclusively to one socioeconomic group, because people do that, especially with vaping, especially. So a little bit about what is the main things that you should know. This helps you with your colleagues, supporting your colleagues. The more you know, the better you do. Just you as a patient or a client or your patients or your colleagues, the more you know, the better they do to support for yourself or for somebody else. So nicotine is evidently the main, it's the main one. There are other bits in smoking, in particular, carbon monoxide of all things. If you haven't heard this one, may be addictive. Come back to that if you like and look that one up. But the main active ingredient in vaping and tobacco is obviously nicotine. So it's mostly derived from the tobacco plant. And if you didn't know this, we don't grow in tobacco in Australia at all since the year 2009. It's illegal. So tobacco growing a crop, they found crops in Bondi, I might add, but it's illegal to have your own pot, your own flowering pot of tobacco, against the law. So we do not grow tobacco Australia-wide legally at all. It's illegal. So if you didn't know that, it helps to just set your mind where things are going at the moment. Nicotine, so, is extracted from the tobacco plant, and it can be made synthetically, but it's a very expensive thing to do. And some of you might have seen, if you're buying whatever you're buying online, or some of your clients or patients are buying things online, the tobacco industry free synthetic nicotine, it seems to be a ploy for people to buy into this sort of vape, for example, that has no relationship with the tobacco industry. It seems to be a plus, and is advertised as that. But it is nicotine, and it is artificial nicotine, synthetic nicotine, but very hard to produce. And I've got here that, just be aware, there are 25 nicotine-containing plants in Australia, indigenous plants that grow out back. You wouldn't know it. You probably drive past it all the time and you wouldn't recognise it. But it's high in nicotine concentration, native Australian nicotine-containing plants. This is a little bit about the various forms of nicotine delivery devices, put it like that, right? Just so you know, some of you, of course, know about cigarettes, of course, people who are daily smoking tobacco, daily vaping, they might be, and this is one of the things that you want to ask if you've got a patient or colleague, are they using these things? Because people say, oh no, I don't smoke. Tick that box, don't smoke. But they're vaping. Or commonly in our, certainly, and I'm speaking to you from the inner city of Sydney, there's a lot of these, I'm not sure if you can see my little arrow, but a lot of these water pipes, hubble bubble, argilla, which filters out the particulate matter, but that's about all. So there's high nicotine concentrations in these things, and there's high carbon monoxide in these things. So again, people say, no, I don't smoke, but they use hubble bubble every day and don't necessarily equate that with smoking. But we know that this delivers high levels of nicotine. Always ask, what are you using? What else are you using? Are you rolling your own? There's a myth that rollies are better. Not true. What about the oral stuff, the pouches, the snus, if you've heard of those little capsules? And if you haven't, ask around, you'll see them. There's a brand called Zyn, if you know what that is. It looks like a little, obviously, it's about the size of a Panadol, little tea bag type thing. It's compressed tobacco, and it's in a little pouch, right? And you suck on that, and it's truly pretty hideously disgusting, but it absorbs nicotine through the oral mucosa, where you can absorb nicotine really well. So we need to now ask today, what are you using? What's the nicotine content? What are you using? Not just you smoke, tick a box or not. Give me the details, find out, because it helps you to help them. This is a little bit about what I'm going to be talking about for the rest of my talk, because this matters, and it's not very beautiful, but it's a little chart I put together. if you're exposed to nicotine, and one of the things that people come up with all the time is, why, because I smoked at 17, don't I smoke now? Why did so-and-so give up really easily and another person finds it really difficult? Be aware it matters. A whole lot of things come together that make it either easier for you or more difficult for you. For example, just even the exposure to nicotine in the first place. If you've never had exposure to it, you wouldn't know you have this. And what I'm talking about, what this is that you use the product because it's cheap, or you don't because it's expensive, and you use it because everybody else around you does it, or nobody around you does it, so you don't use it. So these pressures, social pressures, these two social pressures, have a huge bearing on how you initiate into this. Once you get an exposure to nicotine and start initiating into it, other things take over which you have very little control. And I want you to remember that. Not a lot of control, not a lot of autonomy over this, as I was mentioning earlier, not a lot of autonomy, meaning there's a biological effect, strongly genetically determined. There's high heritability in nicotine addiction. I know you've learnt about alcohol dependence being a highly heritable trait. Families, unfortunately, have family members, blood relatives. Remember, it's blood relatives. It's not the social impacts. This is genetics here. Responses to alcohol. Well, we now know today that nicotine is more heritable. Nicotine addiction is more heritable than alcoholism. It's a highly heritable trait. So mum and dad, uncles, aunties, it doesn't mean you're born to smoke. It means once you get this nicotine into your bloodstream, you get a reward, as I've got here, or you don't. Lucky for you if you don't, bad luck for you if you do, because you get this reward which reinforces the addiction. What is the reward? This is these nicotine acetylcholine receptors in your brain that spark off to nicotine. And if you've got it, the natural ligand, the natural chemical that ought to be doing the sparking off is acetylcholine. That's why they're called nicotine acetylcholine receptors. But unfortunately, some people have a ability to take nicotine on board into the brain and react to nicotine, and it's never look back. Priority. They actually prioritize it. We know that there's a neuroadaptation to nicotine in the brain. The younger you are, the more the neuroadaptation there is. Hence, we're very concerned about young kids who've never smoked, but who are vaping high doses of nicotine and literally adapting to nicotine in their brain, which makes it extremely difficult for this growing brain to change when they're into their adulthood. So they're neuroadapting and developing around nicotine in the brain. So very concerning about brain development for young adults, young kids going into their adulthood. So who knows what the future will hold. I wanted to add, and I will show you a nice little chart I've put together about liver function, because nicotine goes into the liver, which is, pretty well immediately, and how you metabolize nicotine, you versus me versus somebody else. This is all to do, again, it's an inherited trait, how you manage nicotine in your liver. You can either break it down really quickly or break it down really slowly. Slower users of nicotine are less addicted, faster breaking down, faster metabolizing of nicotine, and you're more likely to be addicted to it. And this is a liver enzyme type with which you are born. Some people, whole groups of people, have faster metabolizing of nicotine than other groups of people. So just be aware, it's not a control thing that you can do much about, how your liver functions, but just be aware that this is truly a genetic determined problem for a lot of people who don't even know about it, and now you do. So now you know, is there a family history? Is there are some of my family members really dependent and others maybe not? Or friends, or you have a partner, somebody who is and somebody who isn't, even though they're using the same amount of whatever it is, they end up being able to quit like that, and the other lot can't do it, find it really hard. So I'm just pointing out some of the material I'm going to talk about today. Just to remind you, the nicotine is odorless and colourless. And I'm putting this up here to remind you of this because it's not the yellow fingers. This is a mistake. It's not correct that nicotine stains your fingers, the room, the walls. Not correct. Nicotine is colourless and odorless. Now that matters. If you're vaping, for example, you don't smell somebody else's nicotine. Or smokers, you don't smell nicotine. What you smell is the flavorings, but you don't smell it, which is important when we're talking about passive vaping. You don't know you're getting somebody else's nicotine. How would you know? You can't smell it. It's not going to stain anybody's fingers. I want to remind you that most of the nicotine from a cigarette is blown out into the air from a cigarette or a vape. About 80%, and I'm going to show you that in a little diagram in a minute. Nicotine comes into your mouth, up your nose, into your respiratory tract, right? In your ears. I've seen somebody smoke through the ear, by the way. Through the ear, through a hole in the ear, right? Up your nose, in your mouth, but not into your gut. We don't eat nicotine. We chew tobacco, right? Chewing oral, but not into your gut. So if you swallowed, for example, a whole packet of nicotine gum, the whole lot in one shot, it's going to go in one end and out the other. We don't really ever see, and in my career, and it's long, my career, have I ever seen a nicotine overdose by eating it? Maybe. You know, the nicotine poisoning story is really a bit of a furphy, and if I had time, I would tell you more about that furphy, but it's really not. It's got to be a small person, little person, right, maybe drinking a bottle of mum's nicotine vape, material that be absorbed in the gut, because nicotine really isn't absorbed in your gut or my gut at all. We destroy it. It's really got to be inhaled. So it's very effective being inhaled, right, into the respiratory tract, crosses the blood-brain barrier very, very quickly. So you're thinking inhaled through the arterial blood, right? This is arterial blood. When you breathe it in, it's arterial blood. That's really fast because you're bypassing the whole venous system when you breathe in any drug. A drug is better than injecting it, really. It's much quicker. And I want to remind you that nicotine is a very short-acting drug. It's unfortunately part of the problem. Again, how you metabolize nicotine versus me versus somebody else. The faster metabolizers could be 40 minutes and you've got the half-life of nicotine done. 40 minutes, very, very quick. It could be 2 hours. This matters. So if in 40 minutes, mostly the average is about 40 minutes or so, this is why there are 25 cigarettes in a packet of cigarettes. That's not for no reason. Think 18 hours of your waking day divided by the half-life of nicotine, and people go, the penny drops. When you wake up in the morning, you're going to need nicotine straight away because you've metabolized the lot. It's in your urine. It comes out in your urine mostly, right? And then you've got to wake up, you're using it as a neurotransmitter in your brain, and unfortunately if you're a fast metabolizer of nicotine, it's coming out in your urine within about 40 minutes, mostly gone. So you're going to need another one. So the tobacco industry for years have known the half-life matters, right? It matters for all of this. And if you think, why is it's not an arbitrary number, 25 cigarettes in a box. This is your waking day, divided up by the half-life. This is a little bit about nicotine and its major metabolite, which is cotinine. So we measure cotinine, its metabolite, a lot, and I'll show you a little bit about that later on. And so we can get a better idea of what you're actually getting out of a cigarette or vape. And I want to remind you, if you didn't know this, the plasma levels of nicotine in your cigarettes, in your vapes, in your plasma is in nanograms, not milligrams. People just assume, okay, this is my vape. I'm not sure if you can see it. Here's a vape, and I get bar, lush ice. Cool. If I'm smoking a vape, or sorry, inhaling from a vape, or I'm smoking a cigarette, this might be my pseudo cigarette, and it says 1 milligrams of nicotine. I never get a milligram of nicotine. That would kill me. It would be fatal from one cigarette, let alone 25 a day. What happens is, as I said earlier, most of it goes out in the air. What you inhale, you dilute by your lung volume and then by your blood volume. All of the nicotine, including nicotine replacement therapies, are in nanograms, not milligrams. Look at the fine print if you care to look on the instructions, say, of your nicotine patches. They never deliver 25 milligrams of nicotine. No way. No way. So one of the major problems and the major myths about nicotine, say, and nicotine replacement therapy is the doses that people are getting. Major problem with doses. So I'm going to hopefully set that straight today.